to do that yourself. It's the kind of the Australian landscape, the Dutch landscape, and so you're doing this yourself.
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And even the mountains in this case, in this work here, it's nearly Chinese or Japanese.
Yeah, definitely.
And so there's
and the waves.
And
even.
the waves, yeah.
Yeah.
So I like the combination of, while you may look at the landscape, it's unknown what landscape it is, and even the trees, you may think, oh, that looks like a birch tree, for instance, or that looks like that. Well, that could be any type of tree. Really, it doesn't really reflect to a particular type of tree
or place.
or place, and I kind of like that. I like that the landscape is completely constructed, but it looks real.
And that links with that whole idea of the utopia and this constructed utopia.
Yeah.
I think it's even interesting how the clouds, they look like woodblock prints,
yeah.
and you know, there's all these different elements there. Yeah. In relation to how you've done the carving onto the print, can you talk about how you've developed that process?
It came out of frustration that I just took the scalpel to the paper.
I feel that.
And I liked where it was going. So because a lot of people think when I first started, I think, okay, well, he must have a photograph of a landscape that he goes by, or he must print some lines onto the paper, and then of a photograph or of another print to start. And I don't. So I look at the figures first, the figures that are so pre-recorded, pre-photographs. Although, like, I'm about to start a new set of photographs. And then carve into it. And of course now I already have the idea that I'm going to photograph this to then carve into it. So it's going to be quite different in the future. But for now, I've had the figures. The photographs were taken in 2004. No, 2007. And I hadn't developed this technique. So I then started developing the technique of carving into it. And then I looked at the photograph and thought, okay, what is the photograph doing? In this case, while the photograph was taken while I was lying on the floor, so the photograph was staying from the top down, me lying in the floor, and it was raining. And when you turn the photograph, it looks like the figure is climbing, like in this case. So I looked at the figure and I placed it onto a much bigger black canvas, to where I thought, okay, what is the figure doing? The figure is climbing, and so in my mind I knew where the cliffs were going to be. And then I printed this, meter by meter. I then sit in front of the black canvas with just the figure. And then I think, okay, well, what's going to be where? And sometimes it takes me about 15-20 minutes before I even put the first line onto the paper, because I may not know yet. And then I put the main lines down. Now, to me, the tree on the left was the very first thing. That was the most important thing for me, and purely about the idea of balance. The next thing was, I knew the cliff was going to be there, and I knew the cliff was going to come halfway into the print. So I started making the outlines of the cliff, and I then started making lines of hills in the background past the cliffs. However, those hills in the background changed into waves later on, because to me there was a flood. So you didn't see the hills anymore. It was completely gone. Of course, now you look at the work and you may not even see that there is a flood. It may not translate to that, but that's fine. But it wasn't until I finished the complete tree on the left and pretty much did the outline of the cliffs, and that I started with the idea of that being in water. That I then thought, actually, then I need another 2 trees, and that's so. It's also the whole process of changing it. I absolutely allow that to change. I don't want to be dogmatic in my process and say, well, that's what I thought I was going to do, so therefore I do. I let it develop, and I kind of like that process. And sometimes it makes, like, even halfway, I'll sit in front of the work and look at the work for half an hour before I make another mark.
Yeah.
And I'm really, if I'm tired or if I'm not quite sure, I'll put the work away. Yeah, I just completely stop and before I go further. But it's a very meditative approach. It's just carving into it, and depending on the angle of your scalpel, of your blade, will you carve more away or less.
Are you a good drawer?
Well, I didn't think I was, but I think I've sort of developed something.
I think I'm sort of quite surprised that you develop it as you go, that you don't have an idea. That's quite skillful, because I think I would be quite afraid of making a mistake and then having to start over. Like, have you ever experienced where you've done something that you really need to cover up? Or?
Oh, you do sometimes make a mark and you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But then you can work into it. Yeah. The problem is if you make a mark that's too deep and too wide, then it's harder. However, I have found another technique now where I can even cover that up, or at least try to cover it up. But there are some parts where I'm thinking, oh, actually that's slightly too light, or that should be slightly different. But at the same time, I don't know.
It's part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process. Well, I like this corner here. I have a like and a dislike about it. I like that you can see the water between the rocks, but I'm not sure about the foreground. But that's part of it.
That's interesting. Yeah, but it's nice how it creates different textures by the depth, how much you go into it, how much you leave.
Yeah.
Which is nice. With your practice, you've taken it to a more constructed, very constructed approach from a straight documentary photography approach. How did you end up here from taking photographs of people picking fruit and it's very different?
Well, I think in both.
But I think they're linking themes.
Yeah.
Which is the interesting thing.
Well, I think in both cases it's classic. I've always been a person, for even my documentary photographs, they still refer to a very formal composition, and so still referring the classic, more traditional art forms. I think even the topics that are picked to photograph working class people, the orchards of people picking the apples, people in their own homes. So it still has that paintingly, pictorialistic work in a way. That's still a reference. The thing that I found, I do indeed find interesting, that in one way you're not. And I was quite anal about the process of not actually touching anything that's in there, and not asking them to do anything. Like pure documentary. And really if I would photograph a landscape and there's a Coke can in the landscape and it's the only red in the landscape, I would not go and pick it up and then photograph it. I would. It's there. It's supposed to be there. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's how I am. To come to this, which is so free in a way, I suppose, but it's not free because every branch has to be the right direction.
What I was going to say now, bit distracted. It's also interesting how photography as a mode of representation, the documentary photographs, you didn't do anything. You didn't, apart from take the photographs of people, because you didn't want to try and manipulate the representation. But here, it's so constructed that you're not manipulating anyone apart from yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting as a kind of, as I guess a thing about yourself. You're trying not to control anyone or put any ideals onto anyone, apart from putting ideals into yourself and what you want yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's also quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to start photographing other people and place them into it in the future, but for this year I think I'm still going to stick to this.
Yeah, it's a lot of time-consuming work. How long did this one take you?
About 90 hours, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered all grounds there, haven't we? Yeah.
If you're happy.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you very much, Henry.
My pleasure. Thank you.